Thursday, July 5th at 5:02. Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner
We'll all
Dan.
stand, face the flag, put your hand over your heart, and begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Tuff. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Chant,
Present.
Commissioner Donovan,
Present.
Vice Chair Bartlett is absent this evening. Chair Carter,
Present.
Commissioner McDonald,
Present.
and Commissioner Tufts.
Present.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Next order of business is public business from the floor. If an individual is unable to stay through the entire meeting due to extenuating circumstances, a total of 10 minutes is provided at this time, during which input may be given regarding agenda items. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. Any person who would like to address the Architectural and Design Commission on any agendized item is requested to complete a speaker card for the recording secretary and identify the agenda item you would like to discuss. Each person will be given an opportunity to address the Architectural and Design Commission at the time such item is discussed by the Architectural and Design Commission. Speaker cards available at the entrance of the council chambers. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. Do we have any speakers?
We do have one for a non-agenda item. I just want to confirm that is in fact the item. Okay, then none for this portion.
Okay, thank you. Next item of business is approval of the May 3rd, 2018 meeting. Do we have a motion?
I motion that we approve the minutes from the meeting of May 3rd, 2018 with the modification as provided.
All right, we have a motion to approve minutes with the modification that was provided. Do we have a second?
I will second the motion.
All right, let's vote.
I believe Commissioner Tufts was absent.
Correct. I read the
yes.
meeting minutes. Should I abstain?
You should abstain.
Should.
Probably I'll abstain.
Thank you.
Do we have a second on the meeting minutes?
I'll second it.
You motioned, so you can't second.
Sorry.
Commissioner McDonald or Commissioner Chant?
I'll second it.
All right, we have a second.
Motion passes.
Thank you. New business. We have one agenda item. It's the Kensington Campus Homeless Facility, site plan review number 17-04. And I believe that is Jocelyn.
Good evening, Chairman Carter, members of the ADC. What you have before you tonight is the Kensington Campus Homeless Facility that is proposed at the northeast corner of 32nd Street West and Avenue I. This project will contain, at full build-out, approximately 102 permanent affordable housing units, they're one-bedroom apartments, 40 temporary mini-housing units, which are short-term single-occupant units, 5 housing shelters that would house 20 people, temporary dormitory-style housing, 4,000 square feet of on-site service providers, for example, dining facilities, job resources, etc., 4,500 square feet for on-site medical, and up to 18,000 square feet for other services for homeless individuals and families. As you can see from the attached aerial, this is a general location of the vicinity. The project site, you're not going to be able to tell me, is, I think I see anything. Right here. Right. right next to the Veterans facility, just to the west. This is a clearer shot. This is the Veterans Home. This is the Copper Square Apartments. And this right here would be where the homeless facility would be constructed. The main residential buildings on the project site are contained within 4 villas. You can see them 1, 2, 3, and 4. These would house the one-bedroom apartments. There's 25 units in each one of the villas, and then an additional unit between these two would house a property manager or apartment manager, and then another one here for the total of 102 dwelling units. These would all be accessed from a main walkway that does not permit cars. Cars would be limited to the 2 parking facilities located that you would access off of 32nd Street West. The pathway that connects the two is sufficient for the fire department, so they would be able to access the buildings if need be, but all traffic would be limited to pedestrian, bicycle, and golf cart style transportation. It's to minimize the amount of cars on the project site. Whoops. These 3 buildings here would house the homeless facility, so you could go in and stay for a night if you don't have a place to stay. That's dormitory style housing. The parking lots are here and here. These buildings here are the support buildings that are not proposed for construction at this immediate time. They would be constructed as funding becomes available. These 2 areas here would house the mini homes or the mini pods, depending on who you talk to. They're approximately 250 square feet each. I think that's what they were. And they would be for a single occupant. 1 large room would have a kitchen facility and a bedroom area, but it would be more of a temporary solution to the homelessness. The villas are 2 stories each. They would be entered in through an entryway into a centralized courtyard. There's 2 sets of staircases for each villa, which would access the 2nd floor. It would be constructed of a cement fiber in various shades of gray and white with more of a sage green accent color. All of these buildings are consistent with the zoning code and the design guidelines. Everything would be landscaped. The landscaping and the site layout has been run past public safety, and they are comfortable with the layout and the types of landscaping that would be included on the use. Any changes to the landscaping or the layout of the site would also be run past public safety to make sure that they're still comfortable with it in conjunction to its proximity to other uses. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have, and I'm sure there are probably several.
Commissioners, questions?
I have some questions.
Sorry about that. We're confirming that the video is recording, and it is in fact recording.
Okay. In the all development section, page number 4, it talks about designing the streets for a range of users, including pedestrian, bicyclists, transit, and automobiles. I know that Avenue I is already designed, but I don't see how, it looks like 32nd Street will just have a plain,
32nd is going to be a private street.
okay.
So it would be, it's going to be developed to private street standards.
And what are those? How wide is a private street standard?
I believe the street's going to be 32 feet wide, I think.
Okay, that's very narrow, but thank you.
You're welcome.
I was just curious. The other thing that the design standards ask is pedestrian connections from street to buildings. And my concern is, how do the homeless people get there? Do they catch buses? Do they walk? How do they get to that site location?
So there's right here, there's a bus stop on each side of 30th Street West, and there are sidewalks that run along here
Okay.
to the project site.
Is there any way that there could be an access a little bit closer to Avenue I along the westerly property line, so people are going to, so they, can access Avenue I, like say from the Villa number 1, so they're not going to go all the way around. And I think our design standards call for access to the streets.
Well, the access to the street is off of 32nd. They specifically, engineering did not want access off of Avenue I.
Pedestrian access? I was talking about pedestrian access.
I can't see that far. Something can probably be added. At the moment, there's nothing being proposed that would connect them to Avenue I.
All right.
I'm sure the walkway can be extended.
I have a lot of questions, so if anyone has any others, feel free to. Okay. Are there going to be any loading areas? Are they designed away from the street? I don't see any loading areas at all.
Everything would be from the parking lot, so there would be no driving onto the project site.
So even the dining hall wouldn't have a loading area that people bring food? I don't know how it operates, so maybe you can explain how the operation of that dining room hall works.
I'm to be honest, I don't know how the dining facility is going to be operated. There is a group that is being contracted with through Scott to manage the homeless services on the site. It's something that they do, but how that daily operation is going to occur, I am unaware.
Possibly, could we condition that if they do have loading areas that they're designed away from the street and are well screened?
Yep.
Thank you. And then trash enclosures. Also, I only see one trash enclosure that's not dimensioned on the north side.
There will be trash enclosures with every one of the buildings. That is a condition of their approval.
Thank you. And then I'm kind of curious, I know that you said that the safety committee had the opportunity to look at the landscaping plan, but I believe that we should also have that opportunity to look at the plan. And we need to know what kind of trees there are, because our design standards call for, canopy trees and parking, fingers of landscape planters, one for every 4 parking spaces, and one for every 12 cars. Is there motorcycle parking? I thought I saw something, but it wasn't labeled, so I couldn't tell. So I'm just curious, will it meet those design standards?
It will meet those design standards. The head of public safety looked at the landscaping plans that were originally submitted. The reason you weren't provided with a copy of those is they no longer match the site.
Right.
So the site's changed, so it wasn't consistent. But all of the trees and landscaping would be in accordance with our water efficiency ordinance.
Right.
And the approved plant list.
Right, because he shows olive trees, and they don't really provide a lot of shade. I would like to see, canopy trees on that landscaping plan.
Okay.
I'm really concerned about people who have really no access to get around, and maybe not any place, having shaded areas, because we're in the middle of a desert. I understand the water situation, but I also think that we need to have, shaded parking lots and shade throughout the facility. So I'm really concerned about seeing a landscaping plan.
Okay.
And would you be providing bicycle racks on site, or will the applicant be doing that?
They could be conditioned to do so.
I also noticed that perimeter site fence proposed on west elevation near Villa 1. What does it look like?
At this point, I have not seen it.
Okay. Are we going to condition that too? Is it only going to be along that easterly property line, or will it also be in the back along the northerly property line?
The fence?
Yeah.
Yeah, I am assuming it will be.
Okay, he didn't note it, and these are kind of small, so I couldn't see it.
There's a wall on the east and north side.
I only see it on the east side.
I'm trying to capture the positions.
Oh, yes. We also need to, make sure it's somewhat attractive. I understand that, what we're dealing with, but there's some really nice wrought iron now that, not exactly wrought iron, but
The tubular steel.
yeah, or metal that they did around Prime Desert Woodlands, really nice too. The shelter buildings, I think, I don't see any exterior dimensions. But you told us they were 6,400 square feet? Yeah. Okay. Okay, again, in our design standards, it indicates planting street trees 1 per every 30 feet along the street edge. Would that be part of the landscaping plan?
Yep.
Okay. So now, like I said, one of my major concerns is the heat island effect. And I think they need to provide shade structures along the exterior over the windows. And I also think around the amphitheater, it needs something to reduce the heat island effect. I'm really concerned about people not having any money, not having any water, and not having any shade to sit, in a somewhat comfortable area.
Now, most of the project site, with the exception of the parking lots, would not be asphalt. It would either be pavers, it would be landscaping. The buildings themselves are light colored, so the heat island effect would be minimal. But we can definitely look into adding.
Maybe some trees or something around that. It looks like somewhat of a corridor of some landscaping, the dining hall, the amphitheater.
Yeah.
But we don't get to see any kind of seating area. Is all the dining hall, how does it operate? Is all the seating inside, or are people going to sit outside, or we don't know, do we?
We don't know. It would be how they choose to operate it.
I would like to condition at least trees around that amphitheater. I know they have some, but I can't tell by looking at this to provide a cooling effect in that area.
Okay.
I was going to go on with septic, but I think that's your piece. I'm not going to touch it. Let's see if there's anything else. We talked about bicycle racks near building entrances.
We have a condition for that.
Okay.
We condition that.
I think in the future, if we could get the aerial that shows the land uses around it,
Okay.
that would be real helpful, because we're supposed to make sure that it doesn't disturb any existing or designated residential development or sensitive uses. Those are pretty much my concerns on this project,
Okay.
other than building articulation. But
We can definitely provide you with an aerial as future projects come up.
Okay. Any other commissioners with questions?
Yes, I have a few questions. It's kind of piggybacking off from Commissioner Donovan's, I guess, inquiry about the landscaping. Some of the trees are shown in these large bowls. I'm not sure, is that really going to enable a tree to grow to the height to provide the shade that we're going to be looking for? It's shown throughout all of your drawings there. Yes.
I believe that's artistic rendering that would be planted in the ground.
Planted, okay, I've seen several different ones of that. I mean, not that they don't look nice, but the
Yeah,
actual
that's-
long run of them lasting. And then I have another question, I guess, is about the heating and cooling units for each of the villas. Where are those located at? Are they roof mounted?
So I haven't actually seen the building plans, but regardless if they're roof mounted or ground mounted, they will be screened. So if they're on the roof, there'll be a parapet which screens it from view. If they're ground mounted, they will have screening around it.
Okay.
May I add something? They can't build it, I mean, it would be nice to know whether, if their air conditioning units are on this roof, because really, we'd like the parapet built in rather than standing up over the edge of the building. I do have a couple.
You still have a floor.
Yeah, and there was, now I totally lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
I'll hold off for now. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a few questions.
Okay?
The pathway that goes through the complex.
Okay.
I'm looking at the rendering and I'm seeing it's pavers, it's brick pavers. I have a concern that a good population of the people who will be staying there may have some medical issues that, as far as ambulatory issues are concerned. Are those pavers going to be an issue for that? Walkers, crutches,
So
canes?
everything is going to have to meet ADA requirements, and that is something that they do check when it goes through plan check for the building permits.
Okay. And you've already straightened me out on the zoning, so I'm good there. Is there any plan for solar use, the sustainable design concept, of solar use, wind use? somewhere?
They're required to have solar.
Okay.
It's, single family has requirements for net zero. Multifamily has I believe it's a 0.5 kilowatts per unit requirement.
And will it be? Do they have a plan on how they?
No,
Plan
so
that.
it could be solar shade structures in the parking lot. It could be rooftop. They have a number of options that they can look at.
And strong protection from strong winds. I take it the plans of the orientation of these buildings was taken into consideration. However, it does look like that the north-south facing buildings are going to take a lot, because most of our wind. Oh, I'm sorry. East-west facing buildings are going to take a lot of wind.
So when we were talking about protection from the wind, we were referring mainly to the apartment complex, and that all of the doorways into the buildings are on the interior of those courtyards and not on the outside where, the wind is going to hit them.
Got it.
So they do have that kind of buffer.
Okay.
Well, I have another question, if it's okay. Are you still
Go right ahead.
Okay. On the interior courtyard of the elevations in the interior courtyard, what do they look like?
So can you,
It's kind of hard to see that.
it is, and it was hard to see in the email, but this is the courtyard here. It may be clearer on this one over here. So that's.
Can't see it. Can we get up and look at
Yeah,
it?
absolutely.
I don't have my glasses. He has only wear my sunglasses.
Or if you want to come look at it on the computer screen, that might be easier also. Okay. So there's that one. And there's that one. Yes, that's interior to the courtyard.
You have to come to the mic.
We need one that you can walk around.
Could you describe the interior courtyard? What are the materials, and is there any greenery in there? And how big is it?
How big is it? I don't know without doing some. So you have grassy areas on portions of it. There's a barbecue. It's more of just an open space where you could sit out and enjoy the weather, the sun. As I said, there is some grassy areas. There's places to grill. What was that?
Picnic benches? I thought I saw it on that one.
Yes, there is.
That brings me to something I forgot about, but do we, in the overall plan, is there benches where people can sit?
In the pathways around the property.
So I know there's seating in here, but that cannot easily be added.
Seating on pathways. In that same vein, if we do end up with the seating on the pathway, then I would assume that waste receptacles would be stationed out there also.
Yes.
And back to the villas, how tall are they? I must have missed it.
They're 2 stories.
So it could be 20 feet to 30 feet, depending?
I believe it's 30. I don't think it's taller than that.
Thank you.
They have the ability to go up to 35 under the zone.
And then I guess my last question to the windows, do they have awnings, or are they going to project like a 2-foot awning or recess windows at least a few inches or foot or something? I'd like to see that conditioned.
What was that?
Either add.
Awnings to the
Not,
window?
not as currently shown.
Okay, I would like to make a suggestion that we add at least a 2-foot window awning on the exterior, or recess the windows at least a foot. Okay, maybe that's too much, 6 inches to a foot.
So window awnings or recess.
I wanted to make a comment. It was based on my concern about the heat as well. I really think my issue, besides not knowing exactly how many plants, because I'm the person that wants trees everywhere. I want shade everywhere. And thinking about how Antelope Valley College is right there, this other building that's right there, the lower income building, the Copper
Square?
The Copper Square. Very nice building, but at the same time, I'm still seeing the heat factor coming from there as well, because it's a newer building. They haven't established that, the greenery per se. I mean, I've been by there numerous times, and I see nothing but really blacktop. And seeing how close and that there's so much desert in that area, Avenue I is, and I totally agree, and I'm so sympathetic to the people that don't have transportation and are stuck out there, maybe waiting long periods of time for the bus. So I definitely that would definitely be one of my requirements to any of that when it comes to the what do we call it, landscaping, is more trees, like as many trees as possible, as the law will allow, basically, in that area.
And I think we did capture that. Trees in the,
Yeah, it's
trees in the
the
amphitheater we captured. But
Everywhere.
increase.
The code does say along the street it should be 1 to 30, but I'm more concerned about the pathway and the areas where we'll the more common areas that we have shade in those areas with canopy trees, not just a little strawberry bush or yeah. So that's why I'm really concerned about seeing that.
So what I'm capturing is increase as much as possible the number of trees, and with an emphasis on the amphitheater, the dining areas, the pathway, and the bus
Even the
stops.
street, yeah,
The street should.
even the street in that area, I think, would benefit from having that sidewalk. I mean, people have their children out there, having some trees on that sidewalk where the buses come every so often where, hey, at least we can grab some some shade.
So the bus stops are on 30th, which is not next to
Right.
the project site. So improvements to the bus stops aren't part of this. I don't know. I mean, I can talk to AVTA. I can talk to, and see if it's possible. But they're not actually on the project site.
So the bus stop is on the VA property or the apartment property, or you don't know exactly? I don't know.
They're on the VA.
Okay.
So there's one on each side of 30th. I can confirm they may have bus shelters, in which case it would be shaded, just not with trees. But we can definitely look into
Shade
that.
is better than none at all.
That is true.
I have a couple more. Were your questions answered?
Yes.
I have a couple more questions. We talked about the trash cans on the pathway. The proximity to the veterans' home. How is the landscaping and/or walls going to be situated in order to ensure that noise is abated from that facility?
From the veterans home or
Veterans
from
home.
the homeless shelter to the veterans home?
The shelter to the veterans' home.
Okay. So there's a wall here, which would be consistent with what the wall that currently is on the western side of the veterans home. What was that?
Is it a block wall or
Right now, I think it's more of the tubular steel type of wall.
So will there be foliage to abate the
Yeah,
noise?
so there'll be landscaping here with the apartment's access from the inside of the villa area. You have the wall of the building, which would minimize the noise going from the project site onto the veterans home property. So between the walls of the units on the homeless shelter property, the distance between those units and the units on the veterans home property and the walls for those buildings, it would attenuate the noise, very similar to a residential neighborhood.
Okay. Thank you. It's another check.
I have one more. Do you have any more?
I have more. Yeah.
Okay, I'll wait till
I'll yield to you. Okay. It's like, we talked a little bit about dumpsters, and you said, what was your answer to that?
So there will be dumpsters provided with each of the villas, and they'll have trash enclosures. It's not optional. It is a condition of approval in order for them to meet the zoning requirements.
And those will be sheltered and
Yeah, they're,
all that.
so you see them now, they're generally block wall with like a canopy on top of them, yeah.
Would they be located on the outside of the villas?
Yes, they would not be in the courtyard.
Given the proximity to services of this project, will it be on-site, outside vending machines and things of that nature?
Not that I'm aware of, but as I said, I'm not the one who's operating the facility, so I don't know what they're proposing to do. I would see it much more likely to be interior to the villa buildings, or maybe interior to the homeless buildings, but not outside.
Okay. I only asked because you
I mean, we can
were
condition them
generous
not
enough
to
to
have
give
it
us the
outside.
guidelines, so I read them, and it did mention had an area that talked to exterior vending, and I started thinking, well, there's not really services in real close proximity other than the AMPM, so it would make sense to have something like that. And if they did, then I just wanted to ensure that they would meet the guidelines for that, with them being enclosed and
Yeah.
things of that nature.
Yeah. And they're only about a half a mile away from, make that a mile, from the Walmart facility. They're half a mile from Valley Central,
Okay.
so
All right. Check. Ground floor landscaping in front of the and the villas, well, all the ground floor.
Okay.
landscaping. It's the landscaping, the spiny or thorny bushes to deter unwanted visitors.
Around,
The type of landscape, the type of foliage that's going to be against the building on the first floor? For safety.
I don't remember seeing spiny or thorny plants next to the building on the landscaping plans, or the previously submitted ones.
Okay.
Would
Can-
you like thorny?
I would like to condition that because it's part of the guideline that first floor residencies have, if there's landscaping there, that they're of the thorny or spiny variety. I almost wrote down the page number on that one just. And we talked about amphitheater shading. Did we discuss yet the articulation of the exterior walls? Let's talk about that for a minute. Yes, and the architecture. Let's talk about the articulation of the exterior walls of the larger structures. The smaller structures, seem to from the picture you showed me, seem to have pitched roofs and some articulation around it. The larger structures, the villas, don't seem to have any movement in the wall patterns. It's relatively flat.
Correct.
It doesn't seem to match up against any of the illustrations in the design guide or any of the intent. And I was wondering, and I might give you an out on this one, was the checkerboard pattern intended to give that effect?
I believe the pattern was intended to give a visual interest.
Okay.
Whether it's articulated or not, I think that was the intent, to have the differing colors and shades to provide that visual interest instead of all of the detailed articulation.
I would rather those larger structures not look so industrial. It is in fact a living quarters, but they look very industrial, being a giant square.
What part of it do you find more industrial?
The villas.
Well, I got that part, but is there something in
Just
particular that reminds you?
Because the general shape of it is a giant rectangle, and if you go 2 blocks down the road, there's another building down there that's a giant rectangle,
Okay.
Challenger, and then you go a little bit further, and there's another set of buildings that are giant rectangles, the prison. I would like for the living quarters to have a little bit more comfortable feeling to it, for not just for the people who are driving by, but the people who are actually going to live there.
Okay.
And just maybe some jutted walls or some pillars, columns, trellises, things of that nature, just to
Something
break up
that makes it look homey.
awnings. We talked about the awnings.
I think that combining the issue with the windows and the face out, I think that would be a good opportunity. If they just modified the face to
Okay.
push the windows into the living quarters a little bit, that would create the
Correct.
depth, and it would also make it feel less
Less industrial, more homey.
old hospital.
Correct. And that's
Yeah.
perfect. Did we cover that condition already? I don't think
The
so.
awning condition?
Yes.
We covered the awning, or awning or recessed building exterior window.
Sylvia requested a 2-foot window awning or a recess of 6 inches to a foot on the windows.
And that would, in effect, in my opinion, if they did that, in effect, it meets the condition of the guidelines. So
I concur.
I think that the applicant or his architect should be here to help us, discuss the project. It's really hard to discuss it. And I don't think that we could tell him exactly how he has to do it, because architect knows other ways of doing these things, and in maybe your next staff report, you could tell us what kind of architecture it is, and why it is, not just the fact that it meets the general plan, but the fact that it has awnings, it has articulation of buildings, perhaps like the one down on 30th and K, that commercial center, doesn't have a foot articulation, but it does have about a 6-inch articulation, and it really does add to the building. So, these are minimums that we're asking for, but I think in the staff report, we need to be saying, well, the applicant says this is the style of the building and how they are actually meeting the requirements of the design guidelines, because, yeah.
Okay.
And you already said the 32nd was going to be
It's a private
a
street.
private street, so that alleviates kind of the streetscaping
No.
requirement?
So what that means is that it'll get built and it has to meet standards, for a roadway, but it'll be privately maintained. The city will not be maintaining it.
Okay.
Is that street all on the applicant's property?
I believe so.
And why would they want to have a private street instead of a public?
That's a city requirement, not an applicant requirement.
A requirement,
So the city
Because it-
is going towards making a lot of the streets and the roadways private and therefore the responsibility of the applicant to maintain versus public, which costs the city a lot of money. So your arterials and your secondary arterials are still publicly maintained roadways, but a lot of the smaller streets are being privately maintained.
oh, thank you for explaining that. And so they would still maintain the requirements of the design guidelines with the planters and those
Correct,
kind
and
of
it has
things.
to meet engineering standards for a roadway. They don't get out of any of that. It's just privately maintained.
Thank you. That's
Thank you. That answers that question for me. Lighting along the pathway, the interior pathway. I didn't see, or it may have been there and I missed it, but I didn't see any illustrations or anything in the site map that talked about spacing of light poles and things of that
A
nature.
lighting plan is required to be submitted. It's a condition of approval.
Okay.
But it also is part of our design guidelines for us to look at. So we need to at least, see it. And against sensitive uses, we need to make sure that, there's no spillage. That's part of our review.
Well, and that's also something that the Planning Commission looks at as part of the environmental document. So those are items that are already thought about at the earlier stages when the environmental portion is done. Although this didn't go to Planning Commission, it did have an environmental document. So I just wanted to clarify that part.
Well, then it
And
would be
I
easy.
understand that they're looking at it to meet requirements, but we're looking at it from the aesthetic perspective. What kind of light poles are they? Are they street lights? Are they gas light replicas? Do they flow with the general plan of the project? So I would like to see it, to see what's being done, where they're being placed, if there's spillage over into windows.
Absolutely, and that's something that we can ask the applicants to provide, including cut sheets of what those would look like, if
Okay.
that's something the commission would like to see.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Yeah, I have a few. I'll be short. I know on a previous iteration of this, and I know I can still see on the north edge that there's a large area that's like a grass area. It isn't defined specifically if it's it doesn't have any specific design use, but I know previously it was loosely defined to be a dog walking area.
It still is loosely defined to be that. It's also, if necessary, a retention area.
Yeah, that's what I thought was the case. I just want to point out that if it does come to fruition that it will be for dog walking, and not even if it isn't, that along with the lighting to consider scoop pickup spots because, and Insight knows, I'll tell them, they see it on the boulevard all the time. We don't have a lot of scoop pickup spots, and we do know that homeless have animals. So the other part of that would be, just like what Grace has discovered over years and some of the Boy Scouts have helped accommodate, is to possibly consider kennel options, even if it's simple kennel options. I know that that's, something that's not anywhere on this, but if they're going to go to the point of offering a dog park, I know that there's a consideration that they'll be housed in the units, but still, just like Grace Resource Center, they have kennels over there to accommodate the dogs for the people that go there. So I would say that we should ask them to consider.
We should condition that, yeah.
You want it? Yeah, I think we should condition that. I think that's a good idea. And we all know that there's a lot of dogs. In fact, I think we know the population of the dogs roughly from the LASA count. I think there's an informal number of how many people have care animals. I apologize, I don't know that number, but I vaguely remember seeing something about that. So, and we know from Grace that that's something that they've accommodated over time. So, I guess I'm speaking for the animals today. Because everybody else covered a lot of the details that I wanted to talk about, and obviously the other buildings haven't been defined. I'm going to stop with that.
Okay.
Any further questions?
Yes, I have a question. I guess I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around the refuse. And if each individual villa is supposed to have a space where a garbage truck is going to come pick that up, and if there are not vehicles to be driven here, because you get a large garbage truck on those pavers, it's going to destroy those quickly. So I'm just wondering about other accesses to pull out the refuse, maintenance, because there's going to be some large vehicles. I don't think these pavers are going to stand up to that.
Okay.
I'm just wondering, so.
I can check into it.
Okay, let's just trying to find out, is it each individual? Because I see there is a refuse building, so near one of the parking lots.
I believe it's near that aft parking lot,
Yeah, I guess the north end,
or northwestern
northwest
end.
corner.
The very-
So when you go into the maintenance and everything, it's going to tear up those. It's quickly going to degrade.
I agree.
I mean, even though we'd like to see nice pavers, maybe it would be better to be like stamped concrete if they're looking for that look.
Okay.
That's all I have.
All right. Any other questions? Do we have any speakers on this item?
Yes, we do. We have one speaker, David Paul.
Mr. Paul.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner, good afternoon. I had to change it to get up here. I wanted to be part of this before you closed it out. Commissioner Donovan, I like how you think I'm an old facility manager, and I think about the nuts and bolts of the operation all the time. And Commissioner Tufts, that was my main screaming point. First, I want to start by answering the question. This is going to be hooked up to the sewer.
Yes,
It's
it will
right
be.
at the Veterans Home, and so that's what that is. Now, if you look on 32nd Street, people are going to come off of Avenue I there and in there, and wherever the kitchen is, you have to get at the grease trap, and they have a big hose or something, so that's going to be there. The other thing is that Waste Management is going to have to go onto those roads, as you were talking about, to get to all of those dumpsters, or they have to push them all down to some central and that's not really going to work. So that's a strong consideration. So those were my concerns. You can dream it up, and then when it gets into the nuts and bolts of actually running it, these things pop up. And they're going to have to find a different way to get the garbage or accept the fact that they're going to run down the road. So that's all I really had. Thank you for your attention.
All right, thank you, Mr. Paul. Is there any other discussion? Commissioners? Any other discussion? All right. Is there a motion? That's,
I think we need to discuss how we want to motion it before we do. Do we want it to come back to us?
I would like to,
Changes?
I would certainly like to see the conditions that we levy come back through us, just so we can close the loop on it, to make sure that the things that we mentioned can come back to us for, not necessarily for approval, because that'll be the planning commission that does that.
No, this commission has purview over the conditions that have been placed on this item in particular. You can vote one of two ways. You can vote to approve the project with the conditions as specified as part of your discussion this evening, or you can vote to continue the item until the applicant has adequately addressed the items, and at that point you would take a motion to approve or not.
I am strongly considering the continuance, so we can see the things like the landscape plan, the lighting plan, and things of that nature.
Are we going to be able to have the contractor in our face at some point, like to discuss this again, or?
We can definitely request. We did, for the record, ask them to be here tonight. They were unable to be here. We can, now that this item is being continued, we can let them know the importance of being here and helping the commission understand kind of the operations and all of the logistics of it. We can definitely convey that message back to them.
I appreciate that.
Much
Absolutely.
appreciated.
That'd be great.
When's the next meeting? August?
August 2nd would be your
2nd.
next regular meeting. However, that may or may not, the applicant may or may not be ready for that meeting, but we can aim for that.
All right. Do we have a motion?
No motion. Are we?
What would be the motion?
That we continue this discussion further before we approve anything?
I would say to add to that, based on
The conditions that we have.
the conditions that we set forth and the ability to see some of the other plans from an architectural design perspective.
Yes. Perfect.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right. Let's vote. And motion passes 5-0. Next item. Public business from the floor, non-agendized items. This portion of the agenda allows an individual the opportunity to address the commission on any subject regarding city business. Under state legislation, no action can be taken on non-agenda items. Members of the public should be aware of this when addressing the commission regarding items not specifically referenced on the agenda. Please complete a speaker card for the recording secretary, and individuals have 3 minutes each. Do we have any speakers?
We no longer have any speakers.
All right. Thank you. And with that, next item is adjournment at 5:55. Next meeting, August 2nd, 2018, here in the chamber at 5 p.m. Thanks, everybody, and drive safe.